Welcome to Stoked with Megan McPhail, the podcast that helps you get super effing jazzed about your work, life, and bank account. I'm your host, Megan McPhail, a former burnt-out emergency veterinarian that quit my hard-earned career to become a seven-figure business coach, entrepreneur, and elopement photographer. Now I'm living a life I absolutely love, full of travel, adventure, and financial abundance, and I am hell-bent on inspiring others to do the same. Are you ready to say goodbye to the 9-to-5 grind and start going after some big, bold dreams? Then let's dive into this week's episode. Hey, it's your host, Megan McPhail, and if you love this podcast, please head over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a review. The more reviews we have, the more Apple will show this podcast to other people, and it'll find other people, and we want everybody to listen to this podcast. So if you love us, please leave us a review. Thank you so much. And today's episode is all about timelines and entrepreneurship. I've kind of briefly touched on timelines in a lot of different episodes, and I just want to go over it more specifically today. I see people all the time in all of my coaching offers, in my elopement photographer mastermind and Stoked to Coach. They all will get upset when something doesn't happen in the timeline that they want it to. Normally with like bookings or launch or some kind of like monetary amount that they want in order to like pay their mortgage or something like that. And I want to kind of break this down and show that like things don't always happen on our timeline. They don't always happen when we want them to. And yeah, have you seen that happen a lot in the mastermind, or is it mainly just people coming to me about it?
No, I think it's a kind of across the board in your mastermind, but also just like friends and family too. Like we think that we're going to make huge strides and like hit milestones way sooner than is reasonably possible.
Yeah. I feel like I could have avoided my first marriage if I didn't have this idea in my mind that I needed to be married by like 30.
I can attest to that as well on my journey too.
Yeah. Sometimes timelines are good, you know, like when we talk about making goals and setting goals, like you want to have a deadline. You want to set a timeline for yourself for that. But if you don't achieve that goal in that timeline, a lot of people will want to give up. They want to quit. They think it's not working. They put a lot of pressure on themselves. They feel like they're going to go hungry and homeless, you know, and we don't see anyone going hungry and homeless, first of all. But also it really impedes your progress, and it basically makes creating your business something that's like not a lot of fun when it should be fun. And it just puts a lot of pressure on yourself. So I want to break this down. Because again, like I think people want things to happen quickly. A lot of people think that once you put a product or an offer or a service out into the world, that people are just going to come running to it. And that's just not reality. You have to have all the puzzle pieces in place. Like your messaging and your marketing, people need to be able to find you. And then they need to be able to know, like, and trust you enough to purchase from you. And that is not what a lot of people are doing. And that's a lot of the puzzle pieces that aren't in place when people think, well, I should be getting bookings already, or I should be booking coaching clients already, or I should be this, that, or the other thing should be happening. I should be married already. I should have a house already. I should have kids already. We put all this pressure on ourselves. But if you think about it, like imagine building a giant skyscraper. This analogy I heard recently, and I think it perfectly sums up this whole idea that like I've been working hard, so like my success should have happened by now. And if you're looking at the progress of a giant skyscraper from street level, you know, you see the fencing kind of blocking off the block, and like months and months and months have gone by and you know they're working on it, but you can't see anything. Like the first story isn't even created yet. And that's because the foundation is being built. And the foundation isn't something that you can skimp on. You know, like you can't be like, okay, well, we hit the 6 months. We got to start building the first floor now. Like, no, you got to make sure that the foundation is in and that it's good and that it's appropriate and that you've done it correctly. And then you can start adding on the next stories. So that's kind of a great analogy for business. And when people are like, well, I've been working so hard, I should be seeing results. It's like, A, you've been working on the foundation, which is great. You should pat yourself on the back for that, because a lot of people have a shitty foundation on their business. And then when they do start getting bookings, everything kind of falls apart. So you might not be seeing street level your hard work paying off, but it is going in there for a reason. And you can't start making the money until that's all in place. So that's a great analogy. But then also when people kind of put on the pressure and are like, I'm doing all this work and I'm not seeing the results, are you doing the right work? Or are you doing the wrong work? Are you self-sabotaging yourself? Are you doing a lot of urgent things and not the things that actually move the needle forward in your business that don't have deadlines? Are you going through the like uncomfortable process of overcoming your limiting beliefs? That's a huge part of having a successful business that a lot of people really try to avoid and skip over. But like, you really can't build a successful business without overcoming some of the things holding you back, like the ideas about money or self-doubt or perfectionism or fear of success, fear of failure, whether or not you think you deserve this, like all of those things can self-sabotage you if you don't work through them, even though you feel like you're working hard on your business.
Yeah. And like taking care of the easy tasks or things that you think like are important that you need to get done. Like, yeah, that feels good to make some kind of progress, but sometimes the big things take time, and that mindset work isn't something that, I don't know, it just doesn't seem to be sexy to like schedule on your calendar, like, 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock.
Right.
Work on limiting beliefs. It's just not very common, or like I would never do that. So it seems like it's like an afterthought, but it's like a lot of like the early foundational work that needs to be done. So
yeah. And I see a lot of people who are posting a lot on social media. So they're like, I'm out there, I'm posting all the time, I'm editing, I'm doing this, that, and the other, and it is taking a lot of hours in their day. But it's like, is that what matters? If that is not the thing that is making your business successful, do we need to reevaluate what does make a business successful? Do we need to learn some lessons here? Do we need to look at some numbers? Are people actually finding us? Is our audience actually growing? Are they resonating with us? Do they even want our offer? Like, there's so many questions that need to be asked. And just because you're posting on social media and spending a lot of time doing that and thinking about that does not a successful business make. So when you feel like you're doing a lot of work and you aren't seeing the results that you want, there's really quite a few questions you need to ask yourself. So for one, I've kind of already word vomited about this stuff, but one, like, are you doing the right work? Two, are people finding you? That's probably the biggest thing. And one of the things that's the hardest to grow is your audience. And like for photographers, it's website traffic. For coaches and educators, it's your email list. If you have an email list of 100 people, yeah, you're not going to be selling out launches. If you have website visitors of $100 a month, yeah, you're not going to be booking elopements. Like, are there some things that you just don't know about that you're not focusing on that are the missing puzzle pieces in this? And also, is your timeline even realistic? And oftentimes it's not. Oftentimes it's unrealistic. And all of this pressure we put on ourselves and this idea that I have to book something by my mortgage payment. And so you double down on Instagram, or you double down on the thing that has not been working this whole time, and you're forgetting a whole bunch of other stuff. And your mortgage payment comes and goes and you still haven't booked something. What lesson is there to be learned in this situation where something didn't happen on your timeline? Are you unrealistic? Is there something you don't know? Is there some work that you're avoiding that you've been told that you should be doing? And you're like, nah, I'm not going to do that. There's a lot going on where if you are missing these timelines you set up for yourself, you really need to, instead of getting mad at the industry or getting mad and wanting to quit or getting mad and thinking it's not working, like really stopping and self-reflecting on yourself and your business is key, because oftentimes there's a reason why it's not working yet. And the pressure you're putting on yourself is just unnecessary. And it's making this whole building a business thing a lot harder and just not fun. You know, just awful. Like, building a business and being able to make money off the internet is pretty fucking amazing that we're able to do this. Like, we are incredibly lucky. And yet so many people white knuckle this and make it into this struggle, hard work. I feel bad all the time while I'm building this because it's never good enough for me or whatever. Like, they just turn it into this really negative thing. And it's like, only if I reach this milestone at this timeline am I going to allow myself to be happy. But like, you have to embrace the journey and the progress that you're making, even if you aren't making money yet. Like, this is the time to learn how to have fun with your business. This is not the time to make yourself miserable.
I agree. That's easy to say, but like, yeah, when that mortgage payment is due in, a week, that's a scary thing. And so I think it's human nature to be like, oh, I just got to work harder. I'm going to work harder and then I'm going to get there. And deadlines like your mortgage or your water payment, whatever it may be, those don't have wiggle room. That's like a scary time to like think of like, oh, maybe I should reflect or maybe I should try something different because it's kind of scary, right?
Yeah, it's a scary time. And that's like the human nature of it, right? Like, I joke that you're not going to go hungry and homeless. Like, you're just not, because you're a scrappy entrepreneur and you can sell a lens or, book some second shooting gigs or sell some furniture or something. Like, there's always a way to make money, This whole woe is me, I can't pay my mortgage thing that I hear. Entrepreneurs are scrappy and they are problem solvers. And there's money to be made somewhere, Like, you can't tell me that you're going to get foreclosed on. Like, you're just not, because you're smart. That's why you're an entrepreneur in the first place. And building a business is hard. And there's two scenarios that I help people build businesses in. One is that they don't have a job and they're depending on this job to be their income. So there is like, oh my God, I have to make this work quick. And that's hard. And then there's also building your business while working another job. So yeah, you may not be worrying about your mortgage payment, but you're burning the candle at both ends the whole time. And either way, it's hard. It's going to be hard work. So you got to figure it out. And just making it more miserable for yourself isn't helping anybody. And so if you don't hit the timeline that you've set for yourself, bullying yourself for that, or being like, God, I suck and my dream sucks and I can't, like, that's not solving any problems, And again, it is human nature to do that and to be scared of your bills and all that kind of stuff. And like to be scared of racking up debt and all those things. But that's kind of like what society teaches us. And entrepreneurship is something completely different, where you do have to learn how to pivot if things don't happen on your timeline or happen to your expectations. You have to look at that and self-reflect and be self-aware. And again, we've talked about this, have your 24-hour pity party.
Which I had this week.
Yeah. Feel your feelings. We're not trying to go for like toxic positivity where we pretend like life is great all the time, but we can't wallow in this stuff because that's not what gets us closer to our dreams and our business actually working. So it's not necessarily that you're doing anything wrong. Like, maybe some of the work you're doing isn't necessarily the thing that moves the needle forward, but it could be. It could be that you're just working 24/7 and you wanted to realize your success by now and you haven't. And it's just the puzzle pieces are not in place. You don't suck. Your dream doesn't suck. Your business doesn't suck. It's this pressure you're putting on yourself that sucks. And being a problem solver, being resilient and persevering and staying focused and not giving up, that's what makes a successful business owner and a successful entrepreneur. And being able to bounce back from your 24-hour pity party is what makes you a successful entrepreneur. And basically having to rework things. And like, if you don't hit an expectation or if you don't hit that timeline or whatever, just really trying to understand why that is and what's missing, like which puzzle piece is not in place. Is it your own mindset on things? Are you self-sabotaging in some way? Are you avoiding something because you don't want to do it? Are your goals unreasonable? There's some explanation for why you're not hitting things on the timeline, and it's not the nuclear disaster that people try to make it out to seem. And there's always an explanation. And that's also where community can really help. I've dealt with this recently with a few members of the mastermind who their lives are very difficult. So they wanted to pause the mastermind. And I'm like, when your life is difficult, that's exactly when you should lean into the community, not away from it, because if you're having trouble getting your work done and it's really only like a few hours of work a week, that's not the time to kind of retreat into yourself, into a bubble. That's a time to reach out to people for help, And that's where having friends or a community or a mentorship group or whatever it is, just not a Facebook group, whatever it is, to have your back and to talk you through this and to help you realize I'm really putting all this pressure on myself. I'm talking all this negative self-talk to myself. I'm like beating myself up and bullying myself over all of this when like things are going to be just fine.
Yeah. But at the same time, that's like a super hard and like vulnerable place. If you're in that world yourself, I can see that being like a hard time to be like, oh, I need to ask for help. In my head, and like the stubborn person may be like, oh, I'm just going to, get through this one and then I'll rejoin or then I'll like connect with other folks. Yeah, it's just like a vulnerable time to like ask for help, which is why that community and like being like a close knit and like having people that you can trust and like lean on. I don't know.
Yeah. Like if it has to be your sister or your mom or your best friend or your daughter, I'm saying all these women, but
husband, brother.
Yeah, for me, it's my Todd. It's my husband that I get to go to about things. But yeah, it is vulnerable. And that's what people are avoiding in entrepreneurship. They're avoiding those uncomfortable feelings. They're avoiding working through that. And they're avoiding asking for help. And they're trying to do it all alone. And that's, again, what I'm trying to explain. Like, you have to get over that to be successful. You have to be vulnerable and you have to feel those feelings and the discomfort and getting out of your comfort zone and, showing that you don't have it all together and asking for help. And women especially have a really hard time doing that. But when I do see them do that and when I do see them lean in, that's when they have the most success and the breakthroughs, and we help them get out of their own head about stuff. And I shouldn't just say women because men do it too. Like there's some vulnerable men that I have coached as well. And it's important to be able to lean into that help. There's so much that society ingrains into us that we have to release. Because there's a lot of timelines when it comes to society. Like you graduate high school at this age, you go to college and you graduate college at this age, and you get this degree by that age, and you buy a house by this age, and blah, blah, blah. And there's tons of timelines that we're living by. Even when I first started my photography business, I was around 30-ish. I think I was 33 when I started Hazel and Lace. I was like, I'm too old for this. And now I have people in my mastermind who are in their 50s doing this. So like a lot of the stuff that we think is important just isn't. And we have to unlearn a lot of that stuff.
Another point is we kind of like need to check our ego because we like think our problems are so unique. And this is in life and in business. And I get caught up in it too. You probably do as well. Like, oh, I'm the only person in the world that has this problem. And like, no, your problems are not unique. If you're going through it, someone has probably already gone through that same mindset problem or like that struggle or whatever issue that you were trying to work through is like
person you should learn from.
Yeah. And that's the time to ask for help and for advice and for support.
Yeah. I think a lot of us think, well, if I just get the technical work done, I set up my website and I have some ads running and I got my email list or like whatever you have. It's like I just get the technical stuff working and then I'll be good. But there's all this emotional work that has to be done too. It's a lot of inner work. And honestly, that's what we talk about a lot in all of my coaching programs is kind of getting people through this emotional, uncomfortable stuff, putting themselves out there, handling rejection, like all those kinds of things, trying to be perfect, and having to be imperfect. And like that just kills people, or like they want the success so bad, but they actually have a fear of success. There's so much inner work that needs to be done that I think a lot of people try to avoid. And then when they're struggling with it and life gets hard, which it always does, this isn't a good time for me to work on my business. And it's like, no, this is exactly when you should be working on it, because working through the hard times in your life, that's still working on your business. Even if you haven't done the technical work, the emotional work is just as important. So sometimes people don't see themselves being productive and they're like, I'm not doing enough, And I see this a lot because the mastermind is 6 months long. So they're like, man, I haven't done anything in like a month or two. But they've been working through their uncomfortable feelings, which is still work. And like a lot of people don't see that as work because we've been conditioned to think that like typing on our computer or like whatever, that's the work, the productivity. But no, like you can spend 2 months learning all these things that like overcoming limiting beliefs and like, why are you procrastinating? Why are you putting off doing this stuff when it's only like a 15-minute video that you need to listen to, like, why are you putting that off? And that's important to know. And like, you can spend months doing the uncomfortable emotional stuff and that's still working on your business, you know? So even the timeline within the mastermind, people get really hung up on and think they're failing and falling behind. And it's like, no, you're not falling behind. You're doing things in a way that makes sense to you and in the way you need to do it. You're not a robot. You can't be constantly productive every day. And just releasing some of this pressure that we put on ourselves is huge, because otherwise we double down on not getting things accomplished and not feeling those feelings and not actually moving forward with our business. And a lot of people will quit at that point when they just need to push through. So it's important to set goals and have visions for yourself and to have some kind of deadline and timeline and stuff like that. But you also have to be adaptable. You have to be able to give yourself grace. You have to realize if you're white knuckling things and kind of release the grip. And then if you have missed some kind of timeline or you think you're behind or whatever it is, why is that? Looking into that and not thinking of it as like my business is failing, but just like it's just more data, you know? It's just data collection. And, you know, I want everybody and every part of entrepreneurship to understand that, and that it's way more fun when you kind of release that pressure and just have fun with your business and collect data and improve the data over time. Like that's what business is all about. And really kind of deconditioning ourselves from everything society has taught us. And being a problem solver, I mean, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, and I don't think the reflection portion of that, it's not something that we're taught in, I guess, school or in our W-2 9-to-5 type corporate jobs, right? You can't put on your performance review or as an objective for this fiscal year, you know, reflect on my mindset, or, you know, just what we're talking about, right? So it's not a tangible thing that can be like checked off the list or like quantified in a measurable way.
Yeah, it's not like something on your to-do list you're crossing off.
Or I sold this many units, or I booked this many things, or I made this much money, right? It's like there's no gauge or like full meter of, I don't know, personal reflection.
Yeah.
So I think that's maybe why it's not as important. Or it doesn't seem as important. So,
well, yeah. And I think, you know, in school and even with our jobs, like we have to turn in our homework by a certain date. And then we have to study for an exam by a certain date and take the exam. Or we have to read a book and do a book report. Or we have some kind of deadline for this thing at our job or whatever. And if we don't do it by then, we suck and we're lazy and we're not good people, you know, is kind of what is ingrained into us, right? And entrepreneurship is just not that. It's constant self-reflection and erasing all those ideas that we're lazy, bad people if we don't do things a certain way or find success in a certain amount of time, because there's so many extra things that go into it other than just sitting at our desk being productive. So yeah, it's tough. And like I'm constantly trying to get people to recognize this within themselves and like help them pivot. And it can be hard to get through that mindset shift from like traditional society to entrepreneurship, because they are just completely different. It's not even apples to oranges. It's like apples to rhinoceros or something. Like it's just so different. So hopefully this podcast helped if you're like really white knuckling these timelines and, you know, struggling with the timing in which you see success. If you're giving yourself a hard time, if you're bullying yourself, I hope this helped you release some of that pressure that you're putting on yourself and remind you that while it's important that we set deadlines and goals, it's also okay if we're not meeting those things, and that you are a problem solver. You are worth it. Your dream is worth it. Your business is worth it. You just have to put the puzzle pieces in the right places, and that takes time. So thank you so much. Bye.
bye.
Thanks so much for joining us on this episode of Stoked with Megan McPhail. If you enjoyed the show and you'd like to help support the podcast, please subscribe, leave a review, and tell a friend. If you're looking for more inspiring content, check us out on Instagram at Stoked with Megan McPhail. And to learn more about my business coaching and how I can personally help you quit your 9-to-5, visit my website at meganmcphail.com. I hope this leaves you feeling stoked. See you next week.